The most effective way to control a situation is to let the other person believe they're in charge. Control works best when it is mistaken for freedom. When you push, people instinctively push back. It is the human reflex of psychological reactance. But when you lead them to a conclusion they believe they reached on their own, they will defend that conclusion with their life. Influence operates differently. It does not push. It arranges. It designs the environment so that the conclusion feels inevitable, even desirable. The person walks themselves to the place you intended, unaware that the path was already chosen for them. They believe they are making a decision. In reality, they are selecting from a menu they did not write. 5 centuries ago, Machiavelli understood that power was never about force alone. It was about perception, framing, and emotional economy. The ruler who appeared neutral, reasonable, even restrained often shaped outcomes more reliably than the one who issued commands. Today, that same architecture exists everywhere: workplaces, relationships, negotiations, social dynamics. The room is built before anyone enters it. And once you understand how that room is designed, you begin to see why some people always seem to win without ever arguing. This is not about becoming louder. It is about becoming invisible at the right moments. When was the last time you defended a decision you didn't fully choose? Direct force feels efficient, but it is psychologically expensive. The moment you demand a result, you reveal dependence. You show that the outcome requires cooperation, and cooperation is never guaranteed. This is why commands often produce surface compliance and long-term resistance. Machiavelli observed that a prince who relies on direct force alone builds a kingdom of resentment that will eventually crumble. Direct commands activate a person's ego. The moment someone feels their autonomy is threatened, they stop listening to logic and start fighting for dominance. If you demand respect, you confess you do not have it. If you demand a result, you reveal your dependency on their compliance. The deeper problem with force is that it clarifies opposition. It defines sides. Once someone feels pushed, their identity becomes involved. The disagreement stops being about the issue and becomes about self-respect. Winning the argument becomes less important than preserving dignity. Influence avoids this trap by never activating resistance in the first place. It does not announce itself as control. It does not threaten autonomy. Instead, it preserves the illusion of choice while guiding direction subtly. This is why people often resist those who are right and follow those who are reasonable. Reasonableness feels safe. It leaves the ego intact. And when the ego is protected, influence can operate freely. Machiavelli noted that the most successful rulers, like Cesare Borgia, rarely used the front door when a side door was available. When Borgia needed to pacify a rebellious province, he didn't just execute the leaders himself. He appointed a ruthless governor to do the dirty work. Once the order was restored and the people's hatred for the governor peaked, Borgia had the governor executed in the town square. The people felt they had won their freedom, yet they were more under Borgia's control than ever. He influenced the outcome by letting the citizens believe they were the ones receiving justice, rather than being the targets of a calculated consolidation of power. When was the last time someone convinced you of something? Was it actually your idea, or were you just choosing between 2 options they gave you? People do not resist ideas. They resist being moved. The fastest way to lose influence is to state what you want directly. The moment you do, the other person stops evaluating the idea and starts defending their autonomy. Their nervous system doesn't ask, "Is this true?" It asks, "Am I being controlled?" This is where most people fail. They think influence is about clarity. It isn't. Clarity provokes opposition. Influence works by forcing the other person to generate the conclusion themselves, because the mind protects what it believes it authored. Yes, that comes from the outside is fragile. Yes, that comes from the inside is defended. This is why questions outperform statements. Not because they're polite, but because they shift labor. You don't convince, you corner cognition. The other person does the reasoning, the justification, the commitment. You remain clean while they become invested. Machiavelli understood that people do not obey logic, they obey self-interest dressed as insight. When a conclusion flatters someone's intelligence or reinforces their identity, resistance collapses. They stop asking who benefits. They start proving why it makes sense. At that point, influence is no longer external pressure. It is self-enforcement, and self-enforced decisions are the hardest to undo. In the Italian courts Machiavelli studied, advisors who spoke plainly did not last long. Princes did not tolerate correction. Being told you are wrong is an attack on status, and status is the currency of power. The advisors who survived operated differently. They never contradicted. They never instructed. They asked questions that narrowed the prince's thinking until only one option remained. In the Italian courts, where a courtier would never tell a prince he was wrong. Instead, the courtier would ask, "If we proceed with this war, how will your reputation survive if the harvest fails?" By framing the question around the prince's self-interest, his reputation and his harvest, the courtier allowed the prince to choose peace while feeling like a strategic genius. Machiavelli understood that appealing to a man's self-interest is far more effective than appealing to his mercy or his logic. He who speaks first reveals his hand. He who speaks last, after asking the right questions, collects the pot. To influence others without them noticing, you must become a mirror of their own identity. People do not follow truth. They follow recognition. This is not about losing yourself, it is about strategic empathy. Humans are drawn to reflections of their own values. If you present your goal in the language of the desires, the friction of their resistance disappears. Familiarity lowers defenses. Once defenses drop, influence enters unnoticed. Machiavelli never argued that a ruler must be virtuous. He argued that a ruler must appear aligned with the virtues people already worship. Identity is more persuasive than ideology. When people see themselves in you, they assume alignment without verification. This is why mirroring works. Not because it convinces, but because it bypasses scrutiny. People don't interrogate reflections. They relax around them. The danger is not that this works. The danger is how invisible it feels while it's happening. When someone speaks your language, echoes your values, and validates your worldview, you assume shared intent. You stop watching for divergence. By the time you realize goals don't align, the relationship is already asymmetrical. Influence succeeds when suspicion never activates. Machiavelli advised that a prince should think as he likes, but behave like others. He cited rulers who would attend religious festivals and praise local customs not because they believed in him, but because it created an unconscious bond with the people. Because the people saw their own values reflected in the prince, they chose to follow him faithfully. They weren't being manipulated in their eyes, they were supporting one of their own. Mirroring didn't manipulate beliefs, it just neutralized defenses. How much of your personality is a performance designed to make others comfortable? If you can't be read, you can't be managed. The most effective trap doesn't restrict choice. It redefines it. When you offer two options, you are not empowering decision-making. You are enclosing it. The mind focuses on comparison and forgets to question the frame itself. The most powerful form of influencing others without them noticing is providing two paths that both lead to your goal. When given a choice between A and B, most people forget to ask if there is a C. By controlling the options, you control the outcome while granting them the feeling of autonomy. This is why false binaries work so well. They create the feeling of agency while eliminating alternatives. Once discussion shifts to how instead of whether, the outcome is already locked. Machiavelli understood that councils could be controlled without coercion simply by setting the agenda. The debate itself became evidence of consent. No one noticed the real decision had been made before discussion began. People don't ask if there's a third option when they're busy defending their preferred one. Machiavelli noted that a wise leader never presents a plan for approval, he presents a choice between two variations of the plan. If a general wanted to invade a territory, he wouldn't ask the council if they should invade. He would ask if they should strike from the north or the south. By debating the how, the council had already unconsciously agreed to the if. They walked into the war thinking they had authored the strategy, when the strategy was forced upon them the moment the choices were framed. If you give them two paths that both serve your mission, you have already won before the discussion begins. People are 100 times more likely to execute a plan if they believe they originated it. People will fight for ideas they believe are theirs. They will abandon ideas they feel were imposed. Influence is the art of planting a seed and letting the other person take credit for the tree. This requires sacrificing credit. Ego is not an obstacle, it is the engine. When someone claims authorship, they invest identity. Once identity is involved, reversal becomes humiliation. Machiavelli understood that rulers were most dangerous when their ego was engaged. Advisors who fed that ego controlled outcomes without ever appearing powerful. Influence works best when it disappears. Machiavelli describes the wise advisor as one who whispers a solution so subtly in the prince's ear. He introduces fragments of the idea across several conversations. Nothing complete, nothing memorable. Days later, the prince announces a fully formed plan, convinced it is his own synthesis. The advisor says nothing. He does not seek credit, he seeks the result. By letting the prince own the idea, the advisor ensured the plan would be executed with total commitment. As Machiavelli wrote, everyone sees what you appear to be, but few experience what you really are. Would you defend this plan as fiercely if someone else took credit for it? The final level of influence is neutrality. By remaining the unmoved center, you force others to adjust their behavior to match your temperature. If you do not react, you cannot be puppeted. You become the eye of the storm, watching lesser minds drown in the emotions you have learned to command. The person who reacts first reveals priority. Emotion signals leverage. The one who remains neutral forces others to adjust around them, searching for cues that never arrive. Stillness is dominance. Machiavelli viewed emotional control as positional control. Those who could withhold reaction became reference points. Others aligned themselves unconsciously. In negotiations, one party grows frustrated. They argue, they explain, they escalate. The other remains calm, silent, unreadable. Eventually, the reactive party offers concessions, just to end the uncertainty. Nothing was demanded, but power shifted anyway. You have been reacting your entire life, which means you have been controlled by anyone bold enough to push your buttons. But the Machiavellian understands that emotions are merely data, not commands. When someone tries to provoke you, your stillness is your greatest weapon. They expected a reaction, they prepared for your anger. When you give them nothing, you create a vacuum that haunts them. They begin to doubt their own position. In that silence, they will scramble to please you, to explain themselves, to seek your validation. You aren't just ignoring them, you are recalibrating the entire social hierarchy. By staying neutral, you hold the frame. You are no longer a passenger in the room, you are the thermostat that sets the temperature for everyone else. You are no longer the one chasing approval, you are the one architecting reality. You understand that true power is not loud, it is the quiet, suffocating presence of a man who needs nothing from the crowd. You move in silence and let your results arrive as a surprise to those who underestimated you. If you are ready to stop being a pawn and start building the room, drop a comment with the words, "I am the unmoved center." Subscribe to Mind Games Explained to master the laws of perception and power.